This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
The Property Show, presented by Boombong.co for millennials.
Good morning, I'm Julian Ng. You're listening to The Property Show on the Morning Run, our weekly take on all things property related. Last month on 28th January, the government launched the National Housing Policy, which focuses on resolving the supply and demand mismatch in the housing sector, as well as helping low-income earners own a home. Today, Shazana Mokhtar discusses the policy announcement with Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, Senior Fellow at the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs, otherwise known as IDEA.
Before delving into the national housing policy proper, let's talk a little bit about the expectations that people have of the policy. What are the main problems that you think the government should be tackling in the national housing policy?
Personally, I'm a supporter of minimal government, so minimal intervention of government in general in the economic activity. And therefore, when the government is tackling some economic issues, like in the case of the housing policy, I expect the government to pay more attention to the general framework in which the economic activity unfolds, rather than take a direct initiative in business and production, like it seems instead the present Malaysian government is doing.
Okay, so with that sort of context set and what you expected, what is your initial assessment of the policy announcement? Were there any surprises for you?
I think that more or less what was uncovered a few weeks ago is in line with what was announced just before the budget or during the budget last November. And therefore, I was not much surprised. Doesn't mean that I agree with whatever was announced, but in general, I was not surprised. I have to say that what is concerning me more, that instead seemed not in line with what was previously announced, is the attempt to give more credit facilities to the bottom 40 in order to help them to become homeowners. Don't take me wrong, it's a noble initiative to attempt to have the B40 becomes homeowners, but while we from one side have to help somehow people to achieve their target, on the other side, as institutions, I think we have to look at financial stability of the people. So my concern is that too much support on credit might, in particular in the long run, might create more financial insolvability for the bottom 40, because we are talking of people that has an income below 3,000 ringgit a month, and therefore they don't have a high saving capacity. And whenever the economy in the medium and in the long run can experience some bad moment, these people find themselves exposed to the risk of a crackdown. So I think that we should be more careful in addressing the long run financial stability for the bottom 40 before looking at their possibility to become homeowners.
Okay, I hear you. So one of the measures under this new national housing policy is the government intends to set a cap on the cost of affordable homes to below 300,000, including some homes priced at 150,000. Wouldn't you say that this is a way to sort of mitigate the risks that you were talking about when it comes to affordability and income level?
I see still, we're talking about 300,000 or 150,000, and we're talking about an interest rate as announced by Bank Negara of 3.5%. For sure, this can be a measure helping the bottom 40, but on the other side, I believe that still we are talking about a big amount of money, and we have to avoid to create in the people, in particular among the most financially fragile people, false expectations of what they can actually do with their money.
In a related vein, the government has pledged to build 100,000 affordable homes a year for the next 10 years. Do you think this is feasible?
In principle, I don't see an objection on feasibility. But as I often argued also in previous interviews, my main concern is not the technical feasibility, is the entrepreneurial feasibility, and I explain. Suppose that the government has the capacity to build 100,000 affordable homes for the next 10 years. Will the market be able to absorb this? In other words, is there a need for these houses? And how do we identify this need and the characteristics of this house in terms of product and location, in example, not only price level. These are information that can be discovered only by playing every day in the market rather than planning from behind the desk. Not only in the case of the government, I mean every kind of single planner would fail in addressing the real need of the market, which are by definition evolving over time, in particular when we consider these projects that unfold over a span of 10 years, and therefore the general conditions of the market are more subject to change naturally, because this is how the economic activity unfolds.
Right. And I think this information gap that you're talking about is something that the government is looking to address for the future. Do you think that they can do it? Or what?
This is precisely the point. I think the government is stressing the need to build a database in order to collect more and more information. But the point I'm trying to make is that in the moment in which this information are collected, the plan is written down and then implemented, that information are already old, because the nature of the market is to be dynamic, and therefore the information that are communicated in the market and exchanged among the market actors, the market players, are continuously evolving in a process that never ends. So if we could imagine a world that at a certain point would stop to evolve in order to allow us to implement our plan, yes, that attempt to build a database will succeed. But the real world doesn't work like that.
I have to say, it sounds that you're quite pessimistic about any attempt to sort of fill the information gap in the housing market.
Yes, it's not a pessimism that comes from a bias, but from the analysis of the market for what the market is. The market is a place where information are exchanged, communicated among individuals. The individuals interpret this information, elaborate them in their minds, and create new knowledge that in turn is transmitted and communicated again to the other individuals. So this is a process that, again, never stops. And the nature of entrepreneurial information, of economic information that is necessary to interact in the market is dispersed in bits in the mind of individuals. It's not statistical information. It's different. That's why all over the world and all over the centuries, all the big attempts of central planning failed. We don't have examples in the world of central planning actually working. But this is not because governments are bad or have bad intentions, but because the nature of the information necessary for success in the market is impossible to be collected in advance and implemented in a sound central plan. If I can summarize with a short sentence, the problem is not to plan. The problem is who plan for who. The one for the many the many for the many.
I'm speaking to Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, Senior Fellow at the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs, or better known as IDEAS. After the break, we'll discuss the policy proposal to strengthen the rental market. Stay with us, BFM 89.9.
The Property Show, presented by Boombong.co for millennials.
Good morning. If you've just joined us, you're listening to The Property Show on the Morning Run. I'm Shazana Mokhtar. Joining me on the show today for some thoughts on the newly announced National Housing Policy 2018 to 2025 is Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, Senior Fellow at the think tank IDEAS. Let's move on to another aspect of the National Housing Policy, and that refers to the rental market. So you're a strong proponent of strengthening the rental market as opposed to pushing for home ownership. This is something that the government has made some attempt to address in the new policy. What are your initial thoughts on their proposals?
Well, yes, this goes in the same direction as my initial considerations on the credit market. I think that helping the people in developing a pro-rental mentality would support their financial stability in the medium and long run, and therefore I'm happy to see a bigger effort in this direction. What is happening with the development of rent-to-own schemes is welcome again, and I think that sooner or later, but probably this is already happening. Also, private developers are understanding that, at least in this moment, that is the direction to go, because the market is not able, in this moment, the demand is not able to absorb the supply of properties, and therefore, even for private developers, probably one way to cover their investments is to promote rental schemes.
Okay, so rent-to-own schemes is something that you are in firm support of moving forward, more of these type of schemes?
Yes, definitely, because this, in the long run, doesn't create financial instability in the sense that you can continue paying a rent unless you decide to agree with your owner, with your landlord, to convert that rent into a sort of down payment. But again, I would leave this bargaining to the market counterparts rather than having this put as something compulsory or obligatory from the government side.
Right. So we don't have a very robust rental market in Malaysia at the moment. What systems or frameworks do you think should be prioritized to incentivize a stronger rental market?
But before imagining systems or frameworks, I think that there is something that needs to happen in mentality. Okay. You can see how hot is the topic of home ownership in Malaysia, how people are sensitive to this topic, and how a certain mentality is attached to this home ownership idea, which is not wrong. I mean, people have preferences, and there is not a preference that is better than the other. But you have to deal with the conditions of the market, for the market move in a direction in which houses are somehow less affordable than what they were in the past. But of course, this is accompanied to the fact that Malaysia grew over the past 20 or 30 years in a sensitive way, becoming a developed country. At the same time, consumption habits changed. People spend more money in less durable goods or in holidays. This is, again, a matter of preferences. Young people want to be free to travel and explore the world before deciding to buy a house. So I believe that Malaysia in this moment is living, from the cultural perspective, a transition point, a transition moment between a mentality strongly focused on home ownership that is not yet disappeared, and at the same time the emergence of new preferences toward traveling, toward freedom. And the young generations are somehow in the middle, and they haven't decided yet what they want. Possibly they want both. but you can't have, as we say in Italy, full bottle and a drunk wife. You must choose one of the two.
How long do you see this transition period going for? I mean, will we be seeing this kind of in-between stage for a number of years, or do you think sooner or later it will eventually move towards a market that's more friendly or open to renting than home ownership?
I believe that it might take a couple of generations.
Generations.
To be
okay.
completed. Yes, these are generational changes. Again, I'm not a fortune teller, so this is my take on the issue. Mm-hmm. But I think that these are long-term cultural changes that take time to complete.
Okay. Now, you've spoken in the past that the government and private sector should develop affordable renting schemes. Could you elaborate on this and what such a scheme would look like?
This is in order to help the bottom 40 without exposing them to the risk of financial instability. I think that it would be a more market-friendly but also bottom 40 friendly idea, the one of opening affordable renting schemes. And therefore, rather than having the government involved in building house to sell, but having the government sitting down with developers, with landlords, in order to see how the government can eventually help on the rental for the bottom 40. So having the guarantee that certain people can't afford more than a certain amount, eventually the government might think to enter the game by helping with the sort of agevolated rental.
Okay. We'll head on to our final question now, and this is regarding the implementation of the policy. Now, this is what everybody will be looking out for. A policy can have lots of nice elements, but if it's not implemented effectively, then it's really just words on paper. What will you be keeping an eye out for in the coming months or even years as the government rolls out the various aspects of its policy?
For sure, we have to look at this promise to build 100,000 affordable homes per year. If the government really push on this, I'm very curious to see how this will happen, and if we will have a step back of the agencies, the government agencies, and a higher degree of involvement of private developers, the conversation about this project. This is the first group of points that I see as interesting to observe. The other is the evolution of the credit market in this direction. And finally, I'm sure that we will see more and more initiatives coming up from the private sector on rental schemes.
And that was Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, Senior Fellow at the Institute of Democracy and Economic Affairs, speaking to Shazana Mokhtar on the National Housing Policy for 2018 to 2025. That's all we have for the Property Show this week. Tell us what you'd like to hear on the show. Email your thoughts to property@bfm.my. Coming up next is the 10 a.m. News Bulletin, followed by Enterprise. Stay tuned, BFM 89.9.
The Property Show, presented by BoomBoom.co for millennials. Real estate for real people.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.